So let's start. I call this Lesson 2, review or solving quadratic equations. First of all, what is a quadratic equation? What makes a quadratic a quadratic? My physics kids hopefully remember this because it's important. What makes a quadratic a quadratic? How can you glance at a quadratic equation and say, I know that's a quadratic? Not equal 0. That's going to be part of the solving procedure.
It has 4 different equations in one.
Getting closer.
It has a squared.
It's got a squared. Quadratic is a quadratic if it has a squared in it. If it doesn't have a squared, you know what? A squared and nothing else funky. No x inside a square root, no x inside a logarithm, no x inside, just a squared. Okay? So taking a look at this, is this a quadratic equation? When I get rid of brackets, will I end up with any squareds? Let's find out. So it says solve. Okay. I would go like this. I would go like that. Which would give me 6x minus 15. I have a habit when I'm doing equation solving, Logan, to try and avoid making dumb mistakes. One of the things I've learned over the years is I drop the equal sign and I keep them all in a row. In other words, if my equal signs kind of zigzag, that just leads to sloppiness, I've learned. So that's an easy one, and it helps me space my work. So even though I've got a big white space here, I'll fix that on the next line. Now what? On the right-hand side. Can I go 6 take away 2 is 4? Why not? Okay, I have to do... So you know what? I'm going to drop the 6 down like a domino. And it's negative 2 times 5x is negative 10x. And then negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. And by saying in my head positive 2, it reminds me to put a plus sign there. Okay, I've gotten rid of brackets. Do you see any x squareds anywhere? So this is not a quadratic. This is actually what's called a linear equation. Okay, how do we solve these? I'll give you a hint. We don't make m equal to 0. How do we solve these? Get x by itself. In fact, you know what? I have a procedure. I almost always drop the equal sign down just because now, A, I've stayed organized, but Laura, B, my next line is no longer blank. I feel better. Hey, I know what I'm doing. Okay. So what's the procedure for that? Well, if you do it wrong, you'll felt sad. I know the grammar doesn't quite work, but if you want to know what the order of things is, you clear any fractions. Do I have any fractions? I'm good. By clearing fractions, all you do is you multiply everything by a common denominator. We're not going to get into that now. That's coming down the pipe later. You expand any brackets. We already did that. You gather like terms. So let's check. Are there like terms anywhere? So on either side of the equal sign, is there more than one x on either side of the equal sign? I know there's 2 different x's, but is there more than one x on any one side of the equal sign? Nope. Don't need to gather. Is there more than one constant term on any one side of the equal sign? You know what? These are like terms. I have a 6 plus 2, which is what? So I'm going to drop the minus 10x down like a domino. I'm going to drop the 6x minus 15 like a domino. Then we're going to do our subtracting and adding as necessary to get the x's to one side and to get the non-x's, the constant terms, to the other side. I'm going to plus 10x over because I hate negatives. So I'm going to go like this. Plus 10x plus 10x. I'm even going to draw the line. I'm going to drop my equal sign down, but not in red, Mr. Dueck. What can I drop down on the left-hand side then? 16x minus 15 equals 8. Plus 15 to both sides. Now, if you are at the point where you are comfortable doing the rest, showing no work, I say to you, oh, grade 12s, knock yourselves out. I free you up. Go ahead. In fact, I'll be honest. I would be showing no work from this black line. I would glance at this because I've done this so much in physics, and I would say, oh, on the left-hand side, there's going to be a 16x. On the right-hand side, there's going to be a 23. And I would have gone straight to writing 16x equals 23. But if you want to go plus 15, I also absolutely have no problem with that either. And how would I get the x by itself? Divide by 16. And in math, we tend to leave stuff as a fraction, so it's going to be whatever the heck 23 over 16 is. I made this equation up. I don't try and make them work out evenly. If they do, it's a fluke. I don't care about you guys enough to try and spend my time giving you nice answers. I just say suck it up and get over with it. 23 over 16, and if we were in physics, we would decimalize that. In math, we tend to leave it as 23 over 16. Oh. The D stands for, at the very end, divide by what's in front of the x. So if you're looking for a dumb acronym, felt sad. Unfortunately, that does not work for a quadratic. Fib. It does work for one very specific type of quadratic where you have only an x squared and no x's. You can get the x squared by itself and then square root. But most of the time, in a quadratic, unfortunately, we are stuck with x's and x squareds. Kind of, oh, this is a linear equation. Why? It is of degree 1. The exponent on the x is an indivisible 1. Solve this. This is a quadratic equation. How do I know? It has a squared. An x squared, but if I write it has a squared, Kyle, you know what I mean. And the first thing that I do to solve a quadratic equation is I make it equal to 0. Check. If it's not equal to 0, I have to get rid of brackets, gather like terms, and then plus or minus stuff. Logan, I got to get it all. I got to be able to do that. Make it equal to 0. Then, if we were in pre-calculus, I would say we would try and factor. Now, we are not in pre-calculus. Our fallback is going to be the quadratic formula, which we'll go over in a second. But I can tell you that this doesn't factor. Does anybody know how you can glance at these and tell instantly that these don't factor? Okay. What's the first number, Brendan?
4.
What's the last number?
2.
Careful.
0.
-2. What is 4 times -2? 4 times -2 in your head, please. Are there numbers that multiply to -8 and add to -5? If there are not, then it won't factor. If there are, it doesn't tell you how it factors. It tells you that it does factor. This one does not factor. So we're going to pull out the quadratic formula. Who remembers the quadratic formula? I'll give you a hint. X equals. Yep.
X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
X equals negative b plus minus square b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Can anybody say it faster than that?
I'm not going to try.
Can you try backwards?
Sure. A2 overall. CA4 minus square b root square plus minus plus b negative equals x. I think that was backwards. I'm a nerd enough that I have fun with it. You never know. I could be pulled over by a police officer, and he could say to me, I'll let you off the ticket if you can rattle off the quadratic formula backwards. It's possible. Maybe. So the quadratic formula says this. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac AC all over 2A. How many of you saw that last year? Okay. Carson. Connor sits in my other class. I was close. Carson, I usually go on a little rant, a little speech about how cool the quadratic formula is. I tell people this is almost like iambic pentameter. It's almost Shakespearean mathematics. This is almost mathematical poetry because it's the only one of its kind. We've known about the quadratic formula for nearly 1,000 years. And as soon as this was derived and discovered, the next logical question was, well, if there's a formula for squareds, hey, maybe there's a cubic formula or a quartic formula or a quintic. Hey, maybe there is one formula to find them all, one formula to bind them, one formula to bring them all, and in solutions, but that doesn't quite work. Anyways, maybe there is like a ring of power equivalent of formula. No. And for the next 600 years, trying to find it or prove that there wasn't drove a lot of mathematics. And it was only about 1850 that they proved, sadly, the quadratic is the only type of its kind. There is no polynomial formula. Okay. Now, you might have had a teacher last year, and I'm perfectly okay if your teacher last year said, and now you list A equals, and you list B equals, and you list C equals, and you go A equals 4, B equals -5, and C equals -2. You can do that. I just erased it. Hannah, you've had me before. I try and be efficient and organized. Maximum efficiency for minimum effort. Okay? I'm intelligently lazy. So here's what I do. I go back to the original equation and I put an A above the A, a B above the B, a C like that, and I actually draw a little box making sure I capture any negatives or positives in front of the numbers as well. So you can list it. I just do that because it's less writing. It's the same result. You okay with that, Chelsea? And now it's plug and chug, complicated plug and chug, but plug and chug. I go x equals negative b. What's b in this case? So what's negative b? Negative 5, 5, plus or minus square root of. I usually do the b squared in my head because I'm good at squaring. What's -5 squared? Positive 25. You want to be cautious with negatives. If you go like this on your fancy schmancy graphing calculator, if you go -5 squared, it doesn't know that you want it to square the negative. So if you're doing the quadratic formula and there's a negative, you have to put it in brackets with the squared on the outside. Or, Mackenzie, you can do as I just did and square it in your head. So I'm going to do that part, and I'm going to go 25 minus 4 times 4 times -2 all over. And again, this is me being me. Sterling, I tend to do the 2a in my head because even if it's decimals, I can almost always double a number in my head. So I tend to, I'll put an 8 there. You can go 2 times 4. Nothing wrong with that. I would not go to my calculator at this stage yet. Too many mistakes. What I would do, I would go to my calculator, sort of. What I would do is I would type in what's inside the square root. I would go 25 minus 4 times -2. Did you guys learn the discriminant last year? Is that ringing a bell, that word? Discriminant? Okay. B squared minus 4ac is called the discriminant. What I would do is I would do that on a separate line, very like on my calculator. I would go 25 minus 4 times 4, whoop, not divided by, delete, times -2. Oh, wait a minute. I got a 5 squared in front. That's a problem. 25 minus 4 times 4 times -2. And I get inside the square root is a 57. That extra step, I find, Kyle, gets rid of a bunch of mistakes. Sloppiness. So if you didn't get that, it's 25. Make sure you use a subtraction sign for subtract. Right? And make sure you use a negative for a negative. Your calculator will treat those as differently because it should. You okay? And now I'm going to actually go for the roots, the solutions, the x-intercepts. They're all the same thing. The zeros. To type this in on my calculator, I cannot go 5 plus square root 57 divided by 8. That's wrong. Is there more than one number on the top? Yeah, I better put it in brackets. Is there more than one number on the bottom? If there was, I would put it in brackets. I'm going to go like this. Bracket 5 plus square root of 57. Close off the top. Divided by 8. And I get 1.568. You know what? I'll go to, for physics, 3 sig figs. I'll go to a couple of decimal places. I'll go 1.57. And then if you're using the graphing calculators, if you go back arrow, it should allow you just to backspace. And when you get right in front of the plus sign, hit the delete button, change it to a minus sign, and that's way less typing. Negative 0.32. Is that correct? Everybody else got the same thing? We'll talk about how you can do this in one fell swoop in your solver in a second, but in the homework, this is what I'll be looking for. Turn the page. 2 more, we're done. Has to be, because there's more than one number on the top. All right. Suggestions. By the way, can you see that this will be a quadratic? I know there's no x squareds now, but can you see that there are x squareds hidden? Okay. How do I solve this? Well, that's for a linear, but we can modify it. The only issue is at the end we have to make everything equal to 0 and bring in our quadratic formula. So I'd get rid of any fractions. There are none. Expand brackets, absolutely. So I'm going to get, by the way, drawing those 2 loops in front door, whatever your teacher called it, but drawing those 2 loops, good bang for your buck. That gets rid of most of my mistakes in expanding brackets, I find. 12x squared minus 3x plus 6 equals 6x squared minus 8x plus 20. You good, Kyle? What kind of an equation is this, Kyle? How do I know? Okay. How do I solve a quadratic? I have to make it equal to 0. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to minus 6x squared from both sides. At the same time, I'm going to plus 8x to both sides. At the same time, I'm going to, what? Minus 20 from both sides. Mark, I always drop my equal sign. On the right-hand side, I have 0, zilch, zip, nada, nicht, nein, ixnay. On the left-hand side, I'm going to have a 6x squared, a minus 5x, and a plus 5x. Don't do that, Mr. Dueck. Thank you. By the way, that was always my Achilles heel in math. I would get 98s and 99s. I was the king of stupid mistakes. Positive 6, take away 20, negative 14. Does this factor? I don't care. Might. I don't know. I'm very pragmatic. Here I'm interested in just getting a solution. We're going to use the quadratic formula. What is the quadratic formula? Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Try doing the rest on your own. I'll do mine up here. Let's see if we end up in the same place. I think this one would have factored. Holy smokes, that's a fluke. By the way, the 4 people to whom I loaned calculators today, some of the menus that we're looking at might be located in a different location on your screen, but they'll be there somewhere. Do you get 1.17 and negative 2? Yeah. Do you get square root of 361? So check if you have a negative 5. You're dividing by a positive 12. Give me a sec. Take a look at your graphing calculator. Okay. Can you press the menu button so you're on this screen here? And can you find the equation? For me, equation is right here. I think you guys, is it menu 7? Menu 8. Navigate till you're there. Find the equa. It's going to be in a different location. And then hit execute to activate it. And you should all have this screen now, yes? So this will solve, if you hit, don't hit F1. If you hit F1, this would solve systems. Remember in Math 10 when you solved X and Y, 2 equations at a time, using the addition, subtraction, or substitution method? This will do that. But what we want is the polynomial, which is F2. What makes a quadratic a quadratic? What is its degree? There's a reason why I hype that whole, how do you know it's a quadratic? It's a squared. Now, the only problem is, you'll notice you have to be able to get it so that it's equal to 0. In other words, starting on this line with all the brackets, the software can't handle it. This is why we don't just give you one of these in grade 7 and say, knock yourself out. There are some fundamental algebraic skills that most software can't handle. You with me, Mac? Okay. But now you can see A, B, and C. So let's try the equation that I have written in blue, the 6x squared plus 5x minus 4. Let's put A equals 6, and then execute. B equals 5, execute. And then C equals negative 14, execute. And then solve is F1. So I'm going to hit that, and then I'm going to come and help people that couldn't get it to go because they were dozing. Okay, we're back. I think your screen might look slightly different from mine because I was able, this emulator is like a different model than your calculator, but most of the screens will look the same. You can, for me, F1 is repeat. I think you have a few other options as well. So I can re-enter, hey, if I'm solving a bunch of quadratics in a row or something like this, you can use this to check your answer. You cannot use this to just solve. One more, we're done. I think one more, we're done. Yeah. Okay. All right. And again, can you see that once I get rid of brackets, a squared is going to appear? Yes. However, I have to be able to use that solver. I've got to be able to do some algebra. If I can't do some algebra, the technology is useless to me. What are we going to do here? Ah, you had an acronym that helped you when you had, yeah. So for me, rather than memorizing FOIL, for me, I just have always remembered everything in the front times everything in the back. In other words, I go multiply that, and I go multiply that, multiply that. Probably in your prime, you could do these in your head. And if you can, great. 6x squared minus 7x minus 3, I think. But if not, do each step. 2x times 3x. 2x times positive 1. Negative 3 times 3x. Negative 3 times positive 1. So I'm going to expect that you're comfy with that bit of algebra, with FOIL, because you've been doing it since grade 9. And in fact, in your homework, if you can glance at it and FOIL it out in your head, knock yourself out. On a test, I would probably show my steps. In my homework, I always try and do stuff in my head if I can, right? Fractions, no. Expand, we already did. Any like terms? So, drop my equal sign down, drop the 24 down. This is going to be 6x squared minus 7x minus 3. I was right. First of all, what kind of an equation is this? It's quadratic. How do I? The reason I do that, by the way, is, Jordan, every time we introduce quadratics, kids get quadratic happy because then all of a sudden you'll give them that equation and they want to minus 24 from both sides. No. If you get that plus the 3 over, divide by negative 7 and you're done. It's linear. You don't need to make it equal to 0. And kids kind of just really get into that whole make it equal to 0. So I always want to teach you, before you jump on in, ask, hey, what kind of an equation is this? So it is a quadratic. So you said minus 24 from both sides? I might agree. First and last time. Solve this by hand and then check your answer on your graphing calculator to see if you did it right. I'll do it up here. Let's see if we end up in the same spot. see people copying. Freeze the screen. Solve it yourself and check your answer on your graphing calculator. So solve it by hand and then use the technology to see if you got the same thing. To get back to the numbers menu, hit menu and then run, which is option number 1. I'm not getting that. I don't think it's the square root of 503 unless I've done something wrong. Don't think so. Minus 4ac. I don't think so.
It's not 21, it's 27. It's negative 27.
That it is. Yeah, you're going to get a 697 inside the square root. Did you get that, Ty, or no? Okay, so on your clear your calculator, because it's one of 3 things, so you and I are going to type together. 49. Make sure you use a subtraction, not a negative. And then 4, hit your times button. 6, hit your times button. Make sure you use a negative, not a subtraction, 27. And if you hit enter, now it'll say 697. Okay? Most common mistakes, kids accidentally use a subtraction sign there. So what your calculator does is 49 minus 4 times 6, take away 27, doesn't multiply. That can happen. Or they put a negative instead of a subtraction there, which freaks it out as well. Okay, any other glitches? That's why I'm trying to throw as many negatives as I can. These are the common ones. Yes? Pause the video for a second. So the quadratic formula, I've argued for years, it isn't tough as much as it's long with lots of room to make sloppy mistakes. And so you do need to practice this. Now, I've showed you how you can check your answers on your solvers. Okay? Your homework then. I've given you 15 questions. You're going to do these on a separate piece of paper. I wanted to save paper. So you're going to probably take you, I would guess, 2 pieces of paper, front and back, maybe a bit more, I don't know, to do these 15 questions. I believe these are the answers scrambled. And then these last ones here, 16 and 17. 16 I did an example of. 17 I have not done an example of. Your hint is cross multiply. Otherwise, I'll talk about 17 next class. Okay? And again, for all of these, I've given you the answers, or you can always check your answer on the graphing calculator, but you need to know how to do this by hand. Any questions at all? So I'm going to shut up.